Wow, welcome once again. This next edition of the Pastors Roundtable. I'm just so happy to have my co-host with me, Dr. Henry and Pastor Paul. I'm Pastor Roger Wade. Today is going to be a packed full day. We have some good stuff today, so you do not want to miss today. We are a show. This Pastors Roundtable is about keeping ministry real, relevant, and we resourced. We are just so excited what God is doing for us.
And listen, what a way to start off this show with the events that happened this week. Wow. The situation that happened in Minneapolis is just devastating, and all over the country where protests are happening right now. And so I believe on this show, we got to deal with some of this stuff, Raj.
Yeah, you're right, man. My heart is still trembling from what I've seen on social media, what I'm hearing in the news, what young people are saying to me about Pastor, what's going on. I want to stand up and say, hey, I am standing with the families, with the situation that we are against this. It seems as if it is a blatant attack on African American, and we gotta stop it. We gotta speak out against it. We've got to pray against it, but we've got to speak out against it. And if we need to protest against it, we need to do it too.
And I tell you what, there's a statement that is often equated with MLK that says, our lives begin to end the day we become silent. And so we just can't be silent.
That's right.
Yeah, I think that many of us have so long looked at the posture that the Seventh-day Adventist Church takes as a prophetic church, and we have isolated that prophetic word to simply be about theology. But that prophetic word, that prophetic posture that comes up in Revelation chapter 12 is something that I think God calls us to speak both prophetically and practically in that prophetic word. And so if we're going to really be that remnant church that keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ, the testimony of Jesus Christ we know is the spirit of prophecy, but that's not just isolated to a single individual, single voice in this church. It is designed to be a characterization of a last day people, a group of people willing to stand up, to speak truth to power, to call out evil, not just denominational evil, not just theological evil, but just flat out evil. And so if we're going to shoulder that definition of being a remnant church, we cannot be willing to just sit idly by on the sidelines anymore and to silence the testimony of Jesus Christ.
That's right. That's right. We cannot do that anymore. Listen, guys, on the table today, we're going to be talking about mental health, COVID-19, the church. But what we have seen on TV, what we've seen on social media, it's already affecting our mental health. But Dion, we have someone special, right?
That's right. Listen, because we want to be real. This is not a show where we're just trying to fake it till you make it, right? No, we want to be real. And so right now we have Pastor Johnathan Fields, who is a pastor in the Central States Conference. His church is just a stone throw away from the burnings in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And so we have him on right now. We want to bring Johnathan Fields, Pastor Johnathan Fields, my friend, onto the show to let us know what's going on. Pastor Fields.
Hey, yeah. All right. Are we there?
Yes, we are here. Listen, I know you are on ground. You're in ground zero. You're right
yes,
there.
Sir.
Wow.
And so
we're right here, man.
Tell us, what are you seeing? What's happening?
This is just a phase of what is taking place here. My church, Ebenezer Fellowship, is about a block and a half east of here. It's about a block and a half, and I actually had to park my car, jump on my bike and ride down because they have everything blocked off. But what you're seeing right here, right now, is the community coming together. I'm standing right here. What used to be, now the sign is upside down. I'm gonna try to flip my camera around so you can see what used to be an African paradise restaurant. I'm gonna try to turn my camera around. This used to hang up here. But what's happened is it has burnt down. They burned it down. And now you have the community coming together. They're pulling it together. They showed up with brooms. They showed up with dustpans. They have graffiti. They're actually getting the graffiti off the wall. And so this is the resilience of the community coming together. Now I'm on my way about 4 blocks east of here to where they're actually doing a rally for George Floyd.
Mm.
They're meeting at the spot exactly, where his death took place. Let me turn my camera back around here. They're actually meeting there with a group of pastors I spoke with, one of the leaders, one of Elder Babington, who I wasn't able to meet with the mayor today. I had a personal issue that I was dealing with. I didn't get in. I didn't lay down till 4 this morning. And so we met with the mayor, and they put an order in place of a curfew for 8 hours. I mean, starting at 8 o'clock, I'm going to 6:30 a.m.
Wow.
And so this curfew is not just to prevent the protesters, because sometimes we think they put these edicts in place to stop people from protesting. But what's happening is you have a lot of, for a lack of a better word, you have a lot of racist individuals that are showing up that are actually starting all of these fires. So what they've done is they put this here curfew in place to try to tailor a lot of the activity that was taking place as a result of not the American community. A lot of times we get blamed for a lot of the destruction that goes on in the community, but it's not us. You have a lot of outsiders that have come in and they have actually done this right here. This is what you're seeing. And so now you have the community coming together. They have dustpans, they have brooms. What used to be a Walgreens just about a half a block down, gone. The banks, they boarded it up, gone. All of this is gone. This is it looked like a war zone. Looked like a war zone.
Yeah. Well, listen, I know that, the ministry there in Minneapolis is great. You have members, I think we were talking yesterday, and you have some members that were also involved in the protest, the disapproval of what's happening in that city. Listen, our prayers go out to you. I know that you're meeting with some city leaders today. I believe you're meeting with some of the leaders in the community. And I just want our viewers to know, this is Adventist church at its best. When we join hands with city civic leaders to try to have justice in our community. And so our hats go off to you, Pastor Johnathan Fields.
Pastor
we
Fields,
don't want to take too much of your time. I don't know. There may be some questions
before you leave, Pastor, what are some of the things we can be doing? Our viewers are listening. They're chatting in. What are some of the things you think you need there on the front lines?
Right now, first and foremost, of course, we need your prayers. We definitely need your prayers. We definitely need those going up. But we have a lot of individuals that are out here, water, a lot of tables. I just got an email that there are some of the businesses that have been burnt down. They're still trying to make a comeback. So we have tables, we have chairs, water, food, clothing. Those things will really help out. I wasn't able to get that email. I know that we asked about an email. I have to get that to you later. We can always do a part two. Not trying to invite myself back, but we can always do a part two where we can have that information for you. But right now, man, if you could just pray for us, that'd be so helpful. That'd be so helpful.
Awesome. We're gonna actually in our chat under this video, we will start putting up what are some of the things we can help with there. Our viewers can help with. So just send us that information and we'll get it into our chat. One of our guests who are coming on right after this is involved with Frontline social justice. And so they're going to be doing some things also. So we're going to be working with a number of people, connecting to you and the other pastors in the area so that we can get involved. Thank you so much for what you're doing.
I appreciate it, man. Appreciate it. Thank you so much, man. God bless you guys.
Before you go, Pastor Fields, Pastor Paul, why don't you pray for what's happening, the ministry of Pastor Fields down there or up there in Minneapolis?
Father, we just want to pause for a moment because we know that you are intimately acquainted with the affairs of humanity at this point in Earth's history. We know that it's going to be just a little while that you come back for us, and we know that stuff is going to get bad. But Father, you said that you could keep us in the midst of it. So very specially now, we pray for Pastor Fields. We pray that you would send an army of angels to encamp round about him and his members as they do this work of mercy, as they do this work of justice, as they stand up and stand out for truth and for justice. We pray that you would give them the resources that they need, that you would place the people around them that they need to encourage them, and to just see them through this thing, so that when it all is said and done, that people in that community might see a bigger, brighter, bolder picture of Jesus Christ that they cannot help but fall deeply and madly and passionately in love with. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 One more thing before I leave. I did leave out the family. I reached out to one of the leaders to try to get in contact with the family. So what we want to do also is meet with them. We're praying for them. The family of Floyd, we want to lift them up, and also, we want to be pray for those officers. We want to change our community, but we know change first of all start within the heart, and so we want to pray for them as well, and just ask God to just be with us here in Minneapolis. Thank you guys, and we'll talk a little later.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right. Thank you so much. All right, that was awesome to be able to see that. We thank Pastor Fields. Pastor Henry. Oh, no, not Pastor Henry.
No, that's right.
Yeah, Pastor
Listen.
So what's on the table,
Who's
Doc?
around the table?
We I mean, I don't know how God worked it out, but that's how God is. He just works it out. When we decided to do this show on mental health, we did not know what was going to happen in Minneapolis this week. But, when you think about what they're dealing with, when you think about all the stuff that we're seeing, we're hearing from our church leaders, we're hearing from our young people, we're hearing from our young adults, everyone is wondering, how can this happen? It affects our mental health. I am so glad today to have two young adults. They're young adults who are very invested in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. They grew up in the church. They led in the church. They have led ministry in the church. I have been benefited from their ministry in the church. Today, we have with us at the table, we have Dr. Tiffany Llewellyn, who is a social worker and from what I know recently, she'll share a little more about that, is down there in Baltimore at Johns Hopkins working there. And we also have Garry Graham, who is with us. He is in Ground Zero in New York City as a social worker there, also working with so many different agencies, helping them through this situation. And so we thought we have the best people to come and help us today deal with this subject, COVID-19, mental health, and the church.
All right.
Yeah. So we're so grateful to have you here. We're going to start right off, and thank you so much for coming on the show. But we want to start off with a question, and we'll just bounce it around. Tiffany, you might want to take this, or Garry. We know that this pandemic is real. COVID-19 has really impacted us around the world, especially there in the epicenter, New York, which is on the decline. So we're praising God for that. Yeah. And then we have, police brutality, this attack that we see so often on our young, not even young black men, but just black men, and so we want to know from you, in what ways do you feel that the pandemic, and also the police brutality has affected the mental health of our people?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really important question. When we talk about mental health, we're talking about an individual's emotional, psychological, or social well-being, right? Like, it's really that aspect of ourselves, our mind, our operating system, our executive functioning that impacts how we think, how we feel, how we exist. And COVID-19 just really came unexpectedly and really flipped our world upside down. And so we have seen anxiety and depression escalate in ways that, we haven't really seen before because of the struggles to adapt to this new level of functioning. Because of the anxiety around contracting the virus, losing your job, providing for your family, transferring the virus to someone else, and just really this collective grief and traumatic experience that we are all in as it relates to mourning the world as we know it. And so that is challenging because our physical, psychological, mental selves, it's all connected, right? Like we are not compartmentalized. And I think that's one of the reasons why during COVID, we have seen such an impact as it relates to individuals' mental health. Within the conversation around mental health, when we look at police brutality, we don't often talk about racial trauma. I have studied racial trauma for a number of years. And in the conversation of racial trauma, we're talking about the weathering that happens to Black people or people of color, the mental, physical weight and toll that racism and racially violent events or acts have on the minds and the bodies of Black people. And so within racial trauma research, we are seeing that Black people really do report much higher levels of mental distress, of psychological weathering than any other group, because racism in and of itself carries a toll. And especially during a time like this where we see the ongoing continuous attacks and murders from the police, and we really identify with the victims. We know that it could not just be us, but the people that we know that just at one point it was stepping out of our house, a place that's at risk, and we were afraid. But now we've even seen being in our homes have led to us being killed. When we look at Breonna Taylor, when we look at Atiana Jackson, and individual, when we look at what's his name, who was killed eating ice cream, it's escaping me right now. But when we look at individuals who have also been victims of brutality against people of color, even in their homes, there is an ongoing sense of anxiety and stress and a lack of safety that comes with that. So within mental health, we're talking about racial trauma, and we're talking just the toll of living during the time of COVID.
Garry?
Well, I think Tiffany said it all. Tiffany is exactly right. My combination comes with public health and mental health. So in a way, I kind of seen it coming. When Dr. Messimer on February 26th, the President of the United States went on camera and said that there are 15 people infected and it will go down to 0. And I said, that's going to be an issue. And 2 days later, when he went to India, Dr. Messimer sat down with her family. She's from the CDC, and she says, be prepared for our lives to be disrupted. That Sabbath, I'm head of the men's ministry. I went in front of Sabbath school and changed my presentation. And that when the rumors were coming out that Black people will not get COVID. So I had to stand up in front of people and tell them, this is not true. Wow. And here's the thing. That got so convoluted with it is that at my church, Roger, you probably know this, Greg Hodge, who was a commander in chief at the Office of Emergency Management. And I say this with love. Sometimes our own people, because you're not a doctor or you're not a pastor, I brought him up on the stage for credibility. And the man who is responsible for telling us all of the shelter in place, all of the governor's sign-ins and the city of New York, he got COVID and he expired.
My Lord.
So that's the reality of this. The second thing with mental health is when you go to the hospitals, and as an old hospital administrator, there are people who used to expire maybe 1 a day or 3 times a week. And you guys as pastors, you go see people in the hospital and you know when the end is coming. So we have this cadence of knowing that when people are going to expire and prepare for this. But now what happens is that you have 9 or 5 people dying a day. And then when you hear things like at Brookdale Hospital, Tiffany, you know where Brookdale Hospital is, SUNY Downstate or Kings County, you hear that they have refrigerated trucks, and you think they're lying, and then they send pictures to you, and they're stacking bodies where they're supposed to be offices. This is the reality that's happening. The other trauma that is happening is that one person is not passing away per family. You have 3 or 4 passing away in a family. So people die, people expire, and then you can't bury them because only 10 is allowed. So I'm going to keep it a reality, since some of you guys know. If I were to die today, I don't know if my brothers and mother and father, that's 5 right there that has to come to New York to bury us. So right now I'm praying for God's mercy. If I go or my parents go, that I could send them off with some type of royalty. So our whole lives has been disrupted. So we got a 3-prong effect, and I'm sure Tiffany will agree with me. You have PTSD, you have grief, you have anxiety, because we're dealing with COVID, and then tomorrow the anxiety is like, well, now we're dealing with protest. So let me say this: statistically, police brutality has not dipped since 2019. It has been the same. And so I have no problem finding the documentation and sending it to everybody so you could post it later, but it has not changed. COVID has disrupted everything except for police brutality. And at the bottom of the barrel is Black men. And then we also forget about Black women because that's not reported. We hear about Sandra Bland, we hear about Breonna Taylor, but how many times has a police officer has brutalized a woman's psyche going home late at night? They call the police. They're being harassed. But then a person of a different color would, like what happened to Amy Cooper, Amy in the park, she was able to call the police and they will react. A Black woman, if she calls the police, it'll take forever. And they have to say and have to go through a lot of things to say that it's legit. So there's a lot going on.
A couple of things I want to break in for just a moment. There are some of you that are watching now. We're getting some comments about people not being able to find the stream right now. So those of you that are watching, it would help a whole lot if you would just share this stream on your social networks or the YouTube link. I think the YouTube link is up on the Pastors Roundtable page. I posted the YouTube link on my personal page, on my church page as well. So we want to make sure that everybody can find what we're talking about today, because it is such a vitally important topic. Tiffany, if I may, we first started hearing in mass this term mental health actually in the white community when we saw young white men going up and shooting up churches and schools. And that's when it seemed like the society at large started hearing that term mental health over and over again. And now it comes up, and as you've just mentioned, how much it affects our community, particularly when it comes to racism. But I think that for many, the term itself, mental health, might be somewhat ambiguous. I've heard terms like PSD. We've heard some other. Could you just take a few seconds and just kind of give us the scope of when we say mental health? What are some of the ways that we measure that or that's impacted when or what are we talking about when we say mental health?
Yeah, it's very interesting to see how mental health gets co-opted into excusing white individuals who commit violence en masse in many communities in an attempt to have them escape responsibility. I think a lot of times historically when we hear about mental health, what a lot of people think is they think of the term mental illness, and there has not been enough work around a distinction between the two. We all have mental health, just like we all have physical health. And so when we talk about the health of an individual, we're talking about their physical health, their mental health, their spiritual health, their emotional health. It's all interconnected. Like I mentioned earlier, mental health is that emotional, psychological, social being. I like to, especially for the Christian, I like to connect it to 3 John 2, where God says, "Beloved, I wish above all things you prosper and be in good health, even as your soul prospers." When we talk about your soul, we're talking about your spirit self, that aspect of your being that really holds the spirit of who you are. And that's really what our mental health is. It's our soul, it's our spirit, it's what where our emotions live, where our, just psychological being lives. And it's important to make that distinction from mental illness, because although everyone has mental health, and at times we may have positive, higher mental health, at times we have lower mental health when we talk about things like anxiety or depression, or just normal responses and reactions to life stressors. And mental illness, everyone does not have a mental illness. A mental illness is diagnosable. It's treatable. It's something that you may be in ongoing treatment and be medicated for. And so mental illness is an illness that is diagnosable. But what we really need the education around in our communities is that we all have mental health, and we all have control over where we fall on that spectrum of positive to negative, high to low mental health. It's our soul, it's our spirit, it's our emotional, psychological self.
Awesome. So you're sharing here that all of us are affected by mental health, but not all of us are affected by mental illness.
Right.
True.
Awesome. So as a pastor, when I look at my congregation, what are some of the things we could be doing? Now, let me say it this way. We have COVID-19 that has really changed the landscape of how we minister. While we were together, when we saw each other in the building and we were connecting, what would be some of the things that we could have been doing to help move our positive or give more positive mental health?
Yeah. Garry, I don't know if you wanted to jump in there.
I'll start and then I'll say this. So I think the first thing that we should let our congregations know is that there is resources that Blacks and African Americans are not taking care of. For instance, the same way you have an insurance card that goes to the emergency room, that same insurance card will take care of your mental health. And there is so much resources where that is concerned, but we're so afraid to do that. So even in this age of COVID-19, and somebody will call myself or another person, the pastors should be equipped. And I said, we have something that they call employment assistance program. And you get 4 or 5 free sessions with a counselor to target what is exactly going on. And your job pays for it. You get time off. We call it PTO, paid time off. So the pastoral staff is really a gatekeeper to people like Tiffany and myself. Or you say to yourself, have you talked to your insurance provider? Because if somebody has a cold or if they have an asthma attack, you look on the back of the card, it says for medical assistance, and then it says for mental health, or the key word that everybody should know is behavioral health. That's the word that you're looking for. So if you have somebody in your congregation right now that is sleeping too much, it is somebody who is crying a lot. There's a lot of members in your church that they go in the morning and they look in the mirror and that's all they do is cry. If they sleep too much, they can't get up. They lost their interest. Somebody that has lost basketball, they love baseball. And especially now there's no baseball and there's no basketball. They can't watch their favorite show. They cannot escape. They're in their room. As we say in New York, they're bugging out, but they don't know how to put it together. Even if you lose your job, New York City, and there are cities across, they have like New York City Well. You call that number and there are counselors 24 hours, 7 days a week online to help you. So again, I have no problem sending that information to you, and it's nationally set up.
Yeah, I'm so glad that Garry shared about just some of the education around how to access services. I think that the church is so set and such a great intervention for mental health treatment in our communities due to a long-standing history of, racism even within the mental health system. There's a huge distrust for our communities when it comes to going to a therapist. We know that mental health has been stigmatized for a very long time. A lot of people don't necessarily know how to identify what's happening with them, how to name and put language to that. And so I think as pastors, being able to be a part of the education around mental health, be a part of, just sharing the resources and where people can find, and begin to think about, if I were to go to therapy, what type of therapist do I want to work with? What sorts of spaces can I, exist within that I feel like I can bring my entire self? But I also like to say that I think for communities of color, specifically for Black communities, that the traditional approach to mental health treatment may not necessarily work for a number of reasons. If any one of us were to go Google depression, anxiety, any mental health or mental illness at this point, we only see white images. That's all we've been told. So we haven't really understood what's happening to us in terms of mental health. And so I would love to see pastors have maybe a mental health individual on staff weekly, similar to how we have a nurse on staff weekly, because sermons and services are triggering. It brings up so many things for us from week to week. And so having a point person that if someone feels triggered or feels overwhelmed, they might be able to speak to that person for a bit is key. I think our churches can create support groups or healing circles, not just for members, but for the communities.
Yes.
Someone might quicker come to a healing circle or a group on anxiety or stress or depression at a church than going to a one-on-one therapist. And so I really think there's room for us to become creative and see our churches as really the center in our communities so that we can be able to provide some non-traditional approaches to mental health treatment as well.
So funny you say that. Let me jump in and say, the non-traditional approach should be the traditional approach.
Okay.
Because we are not used to a lot of things. So it blows my mind how sometimes people come to me as a therapist in my private practice, how simple some of the fixes are. And some of the fixes are simply as, they're like a lot of young Black men, they do not see our preachers are Black, but their teachers are not Black. So, Raj, as a little kid, I could admire you and I could admire Dion, but I only see you once a week on Sabbaths, But then when I go to school, my gym teacher doesn't look like me. My English teacher doesn't look like me. And then you have a question, and then they send you to the guidance counselor, and the guidance counselor does not look like you at all either. So this is where the disconnects come in. So I'll share with you that, like, I'm on Psychology Today, and then when I get my referrals, you'll be surprised the amount of Adventists that look at Psychology Today. So I know Tiffany does this, and there's people across it. So sometimes we try to find a network of people to say that, I'm going to tell you, if my son has an issue at school, and it's simply like they're missing their parents. Tiffany may not be the connection for my son. It may be another Black male that has gone through a HBCU, and they're out there, but you got to kind of like dig for it and find it. Let me just say this. You'll be surprised, like, for instance, the amount of kids, their parents are at school, or they move to the city of that school, or they get hired. At Kansas, Danny Manning in 1989, he went to the University of Kansas, and his father and mother went there to work there so they could go through that transition period. So we need to tell our parents it's okay and I'm just using this as a scenario, Tiffany moved to Johns Hopkins last year. If she was a student, it's okay as an undergrad. If your parents want to go to Baltimore or move to the DMV area, it's okay. If you want to move to Huntsville to support your child, it's okay.
Come on.
Because these are things that happen all the time to make your kids successful. But we don't do it enough, or we laugh at it, or we scoff at it, and you'll be surprised how much success comes in with support alone.
Awesome. We've got a couple of questions that are coming in. I want to from our audience. This one is coming from Paul Stokes, and it says, "Would you consider the indifference of a person's physical and social well-being a stressor that will cause a depression which could introduce mental disorders over time?" Anybody want to take that one? Would you consider the indifference of a person's physical and social well-being a stressor that will cause depression, which could induce a mental disorder over time? I think depression is a mental disorder, isn't it?
It is diagnosable if there are specific symptoms that have persisted for an extended period of time, which, we look at 2 weeks and onward, and then there are different levels of depression in terms of mild, severe, etc. Someone's physical and psychological being or makeup can certainly contribute to depression, depending on what are the challenges that they are experiencing around their physical or psychological self. What's contributing to it, what are the factors that play into it. There are a number of people who are unhappy with themselves physically, who are, unable, whether that's a medical condition, whether we could talk about so many different things within those two categories. But certainly they can be factors into what can further lead to a depressive diagnosis.
Okay, I've got two more that I'm going to put these two together. This one is from Barry E. Daly, who says, "What role does culture play in the treatment process?" What role does culture play in the treatment process? And then this one from KK, who says, "There is also a stigma attached to mental illness, especially among the African American population, and treatment isn't pursued." And I think we touched on that just a little bit earlier. But on those two things, how would you address the question and the statement there?
I think Tiffany said it. The culture. I agree with her that along with you look in your bulletins. And in the back cover, it says, Sister Graham is the nurse on duty today. And we're afraid of putting a mental health person on duty on Sabbaths. And if somebody sees a mental health, they think that a word people use now that we try not to use in our community is crazy. So let's take, for instance, I'll use Dion. I'll come out to Kansas City. Everybody's praising the Lord or what have you. We're back from COVID, and somebody raises their hand and starts racing up and down the aisles or what have you. People's going to say,
they got the Holy Ghost, man.
You got the, right. So you either got the Holy Ghost or, that's Sister Tiffany, and she does that every Sabbath. Okay? Yeah. When in reality, if she comes to me or she sits down, she says, "You know what? 3 of my people in my life, they almost died of COVID, and I can't stop praising the Lord anymore." And then that's the reality. But our culture says that because we're so confined and we're so conservative, we're really afraid of that. And then when you go to Sister Crazy's job, you find out that she's the assistant director of something, of nursing, and she knows what she's doing. But when she comes on Sabbath, she's a different person, and she knows how to accept that. Another thing I'm going to add on to that, I would love to see the education department be serious about guidance counseling or counseling within the schools. So I'm not talking, we have chaplains in our schools, we have gym teachers in our schools, but I think the culture of the African American church and our Seventh-day Adventist educational system needs to put somebody who's in charge of a culture in our church. And finally, we need to help ourselves, and because our white counterparts, they excel by using counseling. When we send our kids to the guidance counselor, it's trouble. When they send their kids to the guidance counselor, it's maintenance. And it's okay.
Wow.
You understand? And then, we need to know it's okay that if you're failing math and you're the chubby kid on the playground, your world is not going to end. Especially our young women who matures at different ages, and people get into fights, and mom and dad are arguing at home, and somebody loses a job. These are the ebb and flows of life. We don't take care of it, but our other counterparts, they look on the back of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield insurance card, and they call them up, and they may not send them to the guidance counselor at school, but Johnny may go after school or on Saturday afternoon or Sunday afternoons and take hours, and they get it together. And that's what we need to do.
Let me ask a question real quick. So, say you're looking for a counselor. What type of questions should you ask that counselor to see if that's the right fit? I know that when you're looking for a pediatrician for your child, you're going to interview that pediatrician. What type of questions should you ask the counselor? Because some counselors may not be a good fit.
Exactly. Jeff?
I think. Oh, sorry,
No.
Gary. I think this is a really great question, and one that I get messages all the time for people who want to start treatment. And when I say, well, what are you looking for in a therapist? They have never, ever thought about it.
That's right.
Even when I see my students, I work at a university, and they come to me for an intake, and there's an assumption that I will be their therapist. And I ask them, what is your preference in a therapist? And they're like, what do you mean by a preference? And I think that ties into the previous question around culture and treatment. Your culture is how you live. It's the values you hold. It's who you are. That's made up of all the identities that you hold. And so when you go into the therapeutic process, you bring all of that with you. And so being in such a vulnerable space with someone who can understand your culture, who can understand your values, who can understand all of your identities is critical. And so I see a lot of people who don't want to talk to their therapist about really important things because they feel like they can't understand. So then that tells me that that's not a good fit, because you should be able to bring your entire self into the therapeutic process. So I think before thinking about what you should ask the therapist, I think it's important to ask yourself, when you are thinking about going to a therapist, what matters to you? I have a little checklist. Does race matter? Does ethnicity matter? Does religion matter? Does age matter? Expertise? Does this person need to be affiliated with your culture, with your values, with your race for you? And so these are really important questions. Does gender matter? For many, many people, there are many Black women I speak to that they want a Black male therapist because they want that male perspective that they don't receive, or they cannot be with a man as a therapist because of experiences that they have had, and vice versa. And so it's really, really important before you think about what to ask a therapist is to really identify for yourself what is important for you and the person that you are going to sit with and share these really vulnerable things with, and really feel fully understood within that therapeutic relationship. And lastly, I'll just quickly add, you mentioned fit, and that is critical, because the therapeutic relationship is about the goodness of fit. And not every therapist is the right fit or is a good fit. It's similar to a relationship. Not every person is the right fit for us. Sometimes we have a really good little moment and then it's over. And so if it's not a good fit in that moment, feel free to keep looking. Feel free to keep finding someone until you find that good fit.
I want to add to this, and you're probably going to love this. Before COVID, my private practice jumped because of COVID. So I'm just going to tell you that. But before COVID, my jump came when Kobe Bryant died.
Oh wow!
Wow!
I call it a jump. I had about 5 or 6 kids between the ages of 12 and 18 that their parents called me and said, my son needs a therapist because they are grieving over Kobe. Never met the man in their life. Parents, now I had to counsel the parents because I had to let them know the impact that Kobe Bryant had on their kid's life. So for Magic Johnson was my hero. So if at the age of 13 or 14, I may be giving away my age, that Magic Johnson died in an airplane crash, or it was impactful. And then the second, I had to explain to the parents, especially parents of West Indian descent, oh, what is this Kobe? I don't understand. So I had to break down that Kobe, he's number 8, he's number 24, why he's such a big impact on there, and you had to peel back. And I'll be a little transparent. I had to peel back my son. My man changed his whole Twitter handle to rip Kobe. And so when you talk about culture and you talk about fame and you talk about what goes on, so then I'm sure when your parishioner's son come to you and say, Pastor, my son is depressed over Kobe Bryant, you got to kind of like get that together. And another culture is a lot of people do not want to come to the therapist's office. So you have to make an arrangement with the insurance companies or whatever. And so what I do, I visit a lot of schools. I come to the school. I get to see how the kid is treated at school. He's treated like a king at home and treated like a pauper at school. And then you get to see how the teachers talk to them, how the kids talk to them. And this is why, that therapist fit is very important.
Listen, you all hit it on the head. I look for, when I'm looking for a doctor, I spend hours going through the list of the network, and I look for age. I look for how many languages they speak. When did they graduate from school? I do all of that. I don't really think about that for a therapist, but that would be good. But I saw that we have a number of people asking about a list that can be created, and I just want to share with our listeners that there are a number of churches, even in the Caucasian, even in the African American churches and in the Caucasian churches, that do have a list of therapists, doctors who are available. Sometimes it's at the conference level. So, you can call the conference level. They have therapists who are available. Then a stigma comes up, because then we have a lot of people who say, well, I don't want my business in the Adventist.
Roger, let me just say this real quick. And Tiffany's we will lose our license if we break confidentiality. Okay? So I know you personally, and if you come to me, I cannot tell anybody that Roger is coming to me, because I don't want to lose my license over certain things. So confidentiality is primary here.
And that's one of our myths, that when you share, you are sharing with someone who knows your stuff. But I think that's because we feel a bit guilty, or we feel a bit uneasy when we see them. Oh my goodness, they know who we are. I think Tiffany, you talked a little bit about it. When you go to a therapist, you don't bring your whole self; you only bring part of yourself. And so there are doctors, there are lists available that conferences do have. Trust me, I do know that for a fact. So check with your conference, check with your church, and maybe this might be an idea you may want to say to your church. Listen, we need to go in this direction and get some help here at our local church.
Yeah, I think there's a question on the screen from Pierre Francois that says, how likely are leaders and providers to get help, including pastors? And it just struck me, when's the last time you heard a pastor in his sermon say, yeah, last week I was talking to my therapist, and give that, and you think about what would happen to that congregation, what kind of ripples or rumbles would you hear? If a pastor gets up and talks about, something like that. And so, there's a lot of issues with the stigma of that. I've got a question that I don't know. This is going to take us just a little bit back to where we were earlier. For those of you that our audience that may just be joining us, At the very top of the hour, we had with us Pastor Johnathan Fields, who joined us from Minneapolis. You see our background today, that little movie that's playing in the background underneath our pictures. That is a picture of Minneapolis. That's an overhead shot of Minneapolis. And I know that as many of us watched our television screens over the past couple of nights, and we've seen the rioting and the burning and the looting and things that are going on, I know that there are many people who would say, them people are mentally ill. They got some issues going on with that. When we see people acting out in the way that we see in our communities now, we saw it in Minneapolis, we've seen it in Denver, we've seen it in Washington, D.C., we've seen it in Atlanta last night. Is there any connection to mental illness or mental health? What's going on? Because I know there's a whole lot of people that would love to say, yeah, all those people are just crazy. That there's something mentally wrong with them. How would you address that particular issue? And granted, a lot of them are going to say that, yeah, that's black people. Whenever they get anything wrong, they're going to go and burn up and they're burning up their own neighborhoods. They're burning up their own stores. Interestingly, when we see these screenshots, there's been, in most cases that I've seen anyway, it seems like there's been more white people out in the streets doing this stuff than black people this time. How would you deal with that?
I mean, I think it would be important, if that's the conversation we're having, to talk about, then white America must also have mental illness problems, because this country, was founded through massive violence and, burning and looting and violence against the natives who lived here before and owned this land. And so what we see happening right now has nothing to do with mental illness or mental health. It's I would more connect it to the effects of racial trauma. When we talk about systemic oppression on every level in every system of this country, it is amazing that black people have not raised up and done more. Because we push through every single day, despite micro and macro racial attacks and assaults against us in every single way. And there is an African proverb that says, the child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. And I think that's a really good quote that describes what's happening in Minneapolis right now, and that has happened historically. It's a reaction to how will you all hear us? We have tried to go through voting and go through the systematic ways. Every time we make some form of progress, the rules change so that we are continuously oppressed and discriminated against. And we can't ignore the impact of race that racism has on us as a people. And so do I want to see our communities burn down? No, I don't. But do I understand when a people are fed up and will send a message? Unfortunately, I do. And so that's just the impact, the weight of living in a racist society and just not being heard. How many times are we going to protest police brutality? How many more debts do we have to bear and carry to be able to be treated fairly and justly in this country? And so that's kind of what we see across our states at this time.
So when it comes to the number of white people that we see out there marching and rioting and looting, are you saying that they are suffering from the results and the pressures of racism as well? Are they feeling some of that? What's with that? What's going on with that?
I mean, I think there are two ways that we have to look at that. A lot of times when people of color go out and they protest peacefully, especially black people, there are white people who show up to start things off and then, hide their hands. Like they're saying, that it was a white person who burned down this building, but it got blamed on Black people. And so there are white people who are out there that's looting and being violent, so that the narrative is that Black people are violent and, you know, out of control. And so we can't ignore that side of what's happening. But there are also allies who truly do believe in justice and who believe in standing with us and are as hurt and, you know, impacted by seeing what's happening to Black people and are joining in. And so even though we carry the weight of our racial trauma, the people who love us and care for us also, by extension, may join with us in protesting because of their connections and their care for justice overall. And the movement has always included a variety of people. And that's why it's important for us to take this conversation out of mental health.
So, Tiffany, you are a doctor, you are in the mental health field. How does that inform your social justice activities? You are president of a particular organization that's within, especially the Seventh-day Adventist. Share a little bit about that, and how does your training help with that, informs it?
Yeah, I entered the social justice work through being a social worker. Way before starting Adventist for Social Justice, social work in and of itself looks at people in their environments and the systems that impact them in many different ways. And so that is that's the work, the expertise that I bring to my own social justice work by being on the ground, by spending years and years in communities and learning about the systems and learning about how people are impacted. And so that just ASJ, Adventist for Social Justice, is an extension of me wanting to bring our churches into and at the forefront, or bring our churches back into the forefront of social justice advocacy and work. And so my mental health training helps me to understand, you know, what's happening with our people, to create interventions that help our people, that may be non-traditional, that help our children, that gives language to what Black people experience and allows us to name and, you know, really be able to name our emotions and what's happening with us, and also how we organize and how we move as a community. And so that's why, I love being a social worker, because within social work is about social justice.
Yeah, Garry,
okay.
Got a question.
Yeah, what's up?
So we have what was just mentioned here, that is systemic racism. You know, it's burdening us. As a Black male now, you got COVID-19, you got this pandemic, you have police brutality, you have the side of you want to protest, but then again, how do you manage all of these things? What are some coping strategies that we can use to deal with everything that's going on?
Oh, Dion, that's such a perfect question, because so Tiffany is social work and mental health, and I'm public health and mental health, and we have the same passion. So last year when Cytonia Brown was in Nashville and we got together and we put together a writing campaign, I tell people, if you want to do something and you want to feel empowered and you feel disenfranchised, the number one thing you could do is write your the people, the decision makers. You will be surprised the honor and the strength you get. Now, I only wrote one letter to the governor of Tennessee, but I felt empowered when she walked out there, because I knew I sent a letter. So when Tiffany sends out a letter and her crew sends out a letter to write Mayor Frey, write Keith Ellison, write the governor of Minnesota, it's not the videos that gets people outraged, and not only the protest, is the writing, the amount of letters, the amount of emails that empowers you, that to get you into something. So when somebody's upset, I tell them, write your local person.
Yeah,
listen to the news.
They know my address now, so.
Right, exactly. And here it is. Some people prefer email. My younger people prefer email. I prefer writing the letter And on my social media page, I take a picture of the letter and I mail it, because guarantee you at the state capitol, it is all full, because that shows how important it is. There's been videos in the past and nothing has been done. So what I think changes this movement now is that the fact that you need to get involved with social media, blow up their spot. A lot of people has become involved in the cause, because if you do not take care of one man, it'll usually come back to you sooner than later. Everybody needs to get involved. It is a powerful tool to get involved.
Were you also asking for coping skills on how to manage COVID during this time?
Yes, yes.
Share a couple of coping skills. I
forgot. I'll come back to that too. Go ahead. Yeah.
Because most of us are stuck inside, I want to encourage people to think about the sensory mechanisms and how to utilize your 5 senses to really calm and relax your body. So what sorts of images can you look at that make you feel relaxed and calm? What sorts of some people for listening to raindrops or the ocean, because what happens when we are anxious and we're stressed, our bodies are really restricted and constricted. And so we want to be able to give our brains and our bodies the ability to relax itself, because during COVID, our cortisol levels are high, our brain is in overdrive, and our executive function is lowered. And so when we utilize our 5 senses, it sends signals to our brains that helps to release and relax our bodies. Sleep is going to be critical. Good nutrition, movement, get outside for 5-10 minutes, get some fresh air, get some sunlight. Try to maintain some structure and some routine to your day, especially if you have children as well. They need structure and routine, still maintaining, separating your weekdays, your work days from your nights, from your weekends is going to be critical. I encourage people to identify some sort of ritual at the end of your day that you're going to do to make your brain and your body just kind of shift off from work and be able to relax. It might be lighting a candle. It might be a particular song or show or something that gives you that sort of switch. Acknowledging how you feel in this moment is critical. It's okay to feel scared. It's okay to be worried. Knowing that we cannot control COVID, but we can control ourselves in this moment. We can manage ourselves, because stress is internal. COVID is a stressor that is external. Unless you have contracted the virus, then it can become internal. But for most of us who have not yet have symptoms or have not displayed any sorts of signs of COVID, what we want to focus on is what we have control over, which is what's happening with us internally, that worry, that fear, that stress. And so by really being able to, do some deep breathing, exercise, walks. Lastly, I'll just say, I believe the wrong term was used around social distancing. I think the term that we should have been using is physical distancing, because social connections transcend physical space. And so really being able to maintain connections with our social networks is going to be really important.
Let me just add to this, Tiffany. She said everything. When I tell my clients and my patients, it's okay to cry. I always tell people that, because there's a lot of stressing that's going on. Make sure you get your extended sleep. That's important. Bathe and take care of your hygiene every day. Some people, when they're stuck inside the house, they spend a long time, 3 or 4 days, not taking a shower. The first thing I said, do you still brush your teeth? Do you still wash your face?
Yes.
No, this is dead serious. Mm-hmm. And then when you get into that pattern Tiffany is talking about and still washing, then, give yourself a manicure, give yourself a deep washing of your hair. There's, you can upgrade, from a shower to a bath.
Are those things also signs to be able to? Are they? If you know a family member or somebody who's not doing that stuff,
absolutely,
is that a tip off that they might have? Okay.
Absolutely. I'm not talking about the teenager that doesn't like to. Yeah. These are extended. Tiffany talked about 2 weeks, but you're a human being. You go about 4 or 5 days.
Oh yeah.
And then the information that comes in on our TV. So I could tell you not to watch CNN. That's the easy stuff. But I tell people, like, my wife loves the Golden Girls, but still commercial about COVID still comes in between the Golden Girls. So one of the things I like to tell people, when you go out and you want to go early in the morning where there's nobody out there, so you can have time for yourself. And look at us all today. We all dressed up to be on this broadcast. And look at COVID as a blessing to a point. Let's face it. All these broadcasts that we see today, AY, Sabbath School, across it. I heard of Dion Henry. I went to school with Pastor Paul. I talk to Roger once a month. I know who Tiffany is. But would this forum be here if it wasn't for COVID? God has a way of rebirthing ministry and remixing ministry. And right now, you have a good thing going on here, social justice with Jamie in Texas. And I'm going to mention a friend of ours who probably know, Dwayne Esmond, with the Red Door devotions every morning. You know, I don't think those things would have existed if it wasn't for COVID. So the mental health aspect challenges you to be a better person. You have to change. So COVID is not a death sentence. COVID is a reframing of your mental mind.
Quick follow-up question.
Add one quick thing to that. Is it okay if I add one more coping skill? Because I think this is really important. I want to also encourage people to resist the overproductivity urge. There's a lot of information circling on social media right now that says if you don't come out of COVID with 100 new skills, you lacked discipline. And that
or that master class.
It's simply not
the master class.
That's true.
Because we are in an incredibly traumatic moment. We are collectively grieving our world and living in a state of uncertainty. And so the only requirement that we have for people is to make it through this moment. You don't have to learn how to cook and bake and garden and become a teacher and do everything during this time. And it's really important for us to give ourselves time and space to simply make it through this time as we genuinely feel and need, without needing to keep up with everybody else and what everybody else is doing to be somehow, like visible during this time. We just want people to live through COVID. We just want people to make it through COVID. And if getting up every day and putting clothes on is all you can do, then we are happy that you are able to do that. And
I'll agree with that.
Tiffany,
so true.
You messed me up, Tiffany, because I've been making patties, and my kids said, "Hey, listen, stop making those patties." They like it, but they said it's too much.
My wife is already telling me, "Get out of the kitchen."
She's right. Even mental health, like this part of like decluttering to a point. We have time to declutter our lives and undo. But I agree with her. You don't have to come out with a third master's and be a super patty maker or whatever. But I still taste your patties, Dion. If you got some, you can send them to New York City.
That's right. But look, the follow-up I had with that, though, the coping mechanisms that we need to, or coping strategies that we need to have in dealing with this injustice that we're seeing. How can we have some coping strategies so that we can effectively, promote justice? Because what's going on now, it affects us. It impacts us, and we feel like, you can see what's going on. How we're upset, we're angry. What can we do?
But I'm going to say this, and we're living through it. So every day we got to find an answer now. On top of COVID, it has been packed on top. So I'm going to take this a little to the left, and I'm going to tell you what's affecting me. What bothers me is when I saw the CNN reporter got arrested. Yeah. Okay. And then even though the governor apologized to the CNN family, the mission was accomplished by arresting him. So it made it okay to arrest him anytime, because his white colleague did not get arrested, and he moved on. And that hurt me to the point, because they moved on. Nobody got in trouble for it. I'm sorry. It's okay. And the next kid that get arrested, he may get his knee on his neck. Didn't happen to the man in Central Park. But whenever I see like that FedEx driver or that truck driver who came into that cul-de-sac or to that home and those white males stopped him, or even better, the proprietor that hired the officer and Floyd to work at their place, she mentioned that the officer was meaner to African-American patrons than Floyd. But here's the thing, she still employed him. I mean, she's on CNN saying things like they pepper spray black people, they call police on black people, but she allowed him to work. And I'm worried about the secondary people that allow people to go to the final. Amy Klobuchar, who wants to be vetted for vice president, did not prosecute him. So I'm just trying to think of a strategy how to work with that, because racism is not only systematic, but the gatekeepers of racism allows that to happen. So when I pray and when I talk to my clients and they say, well, that person has treated me badly, that person is long gone. I want to address the person that's making that person go ahead and do it, because there are many more Officer Chavez's. You come to find out his wife is the brother-in-law of the guy of the second officer who watched it. So and there's many of those people going on. And the second thing is, we have this thing, and we're probably going to disagree with me. Look, some people are going to say something. Some people want to make a statement. They want the church to make a statement. They want the pastors to make a statement. We have to make our statement before you ask the GC and the NAD and your conference presidents. You know, the Central Conference president, see, he made his statement. When they opened up Georgia and Maryland, our conference presidents made those statements at different times. Some people that do it at different things. Right. And then you get up on your soapbox and you want your leaders to do it. My question is, in mental health, what did you do? Did you call Keith Ellison? Did you call your pastor instead of screaming and blowing up people on social media? Did you ask them, what can we do? So did you call Tiffany, who's experienced in social justice? Did you call Jamie Colasar, who knows things like that, so we won't get off the hook and embarrass people and work together? So all of these are all intricate in its way. It's not going anywhere. And to see it move to the point that people are fighting the Secret Service outside the President of the United States house, the White House, you know, every day I come up with a strategy. I pray about it so I can have an answer. And then I look on the news, tomorrow I have to have a new answer. So even your therapist is going through it too.
Yeah. Sorry.
Go ahead.
If I could share some techniques on how to just kind of make it through this moment in some sense. You know, it's unfortunate because as Black people, we don't get a chance to recover. A couple weeks ago, we were dealing with Ahmaud and then Breonna, and then here we are again. And so we never really get a chance to catch our breath. We never really get a chance to process our emotions, our fear, our anger. And so we're just constantly going and going. And so I really want to encourage, you know, Black people to take a chance to breathe. You know, in this whole I can't breathe hashtag, we really do need to breathe, because the load and the weight of these moments is impacting our physical and mental health in ways that then leads to ongoing health conditions. And so we need to sit and take some deep breaths. Last night we had a healing circle online through Zoom with Pastor Colasar. That was myself and another therapist, just for people to talk. And so if we can utilize, you know, forums just like this, or, you know, not necessarily this, but Zoom, to create spaces for people to come on and talk about how they're feeling. Emotions need motion. It's something I say all the time. We can't hold it in and just continue to push through. We need to create spaces for our people to know they are not alone, for our people to say, I am angry and I am pissed off, and I'm enraged, because that was some of the things that came out even last night. And so we need spaces for our people to get out what we are holding in. This pain has to come out, and it can only come out in our safe collective circles with each other. And then being able to just rehumanize racism, police brutality, these things dehumanize our people. That's been the plan from the beginning, that we would not be seen as humans. And so finding ways to affirm ourselves, finding ways to affirm our children, to rehumanize us as a people is going to be critical. Go back to those values and the power and the culture and the resilience of what it means to be Black. Not in a way that we are pretending to be stronger than we are. It's okay for us to feel pain, but we are an incredibly powerful people. When we organize and we come together, we can do meaningful things. And let's rehumanize each other. Let's affirm each other. And let's continue to remind us that we are valued and that we certainly matter.
Yeah, as we kind of begin to wind down here, on any given Sabbath, Pastor Wade, Dr. Henry, and myself, we're going to be standing up in our pulpits or somebody else's pulpit, and we're going to tell a story, preach a story about how Jesus walked up to a blind man and made him able to see, how he walked up to somebody who couldn't walk and just said, take up your bed and walk. We're going to preach all of these different miracles that Jesus did simply by speaking a word or people coming to him. And so we have a whole lot of our people, I believe, who have probably listened to some facet of this conversation about mental health today. And some of them are probably thinking, well, why can't I just pray about my depression? Or why can't I just go to Jesus the way that Pastor Paul and Dr. Henry and Pastor Wade got up and preached, how they just came to Jesus and then Jesus just, boom, he spoke a word and it was done. How do we balance that issue of people feeling like, I don't want to go and get counsel from another human being. Why can't I just go directly to Jesus? And then two, is there a role that prayer plays as a coping mechanism, even for some of the things that people that have become stressors in our lives today?
Well,
Yeah.
I think, I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead, Garry. No, go ahead.
Thanks, Doc. Prayer is a component. Faith without works is dead, and prayer activates certain things.
Okay.
So when I pray with my patients and I say to them, today, I don't care what you do, because something that you do goal-oriented makes you feel better for the day. So I take a person and I say to them, in order to relieve your stress and in order to get this out of your way, we're going to pray today that you're going to do 10,000 steps. And you're going to activate those 10,000 steps. I don't care if you have to cook. I don't care if you have to eat. You have to go to Orchard Beach. You have to go to Central Park. You have to do 2,000 steps in the morning, 2,000 steps in the late afternoon. You're going to get 10,000 steps. But prayer is almost like writing a to-do list and activating that.
Wow.
So you mix that. The counseling is, and the goal is, you write it down and you pray about it. And at the end of the day, when you assess it, you find out that it's weaved together. So you can't pray and lie down in the bed and expect to lose weight. Right. And you can't pray and watch TV all day and expect your anxiety to go down. Wow. And you watching CNN all day. So God has given us an activation component. That's why it's so great to be Christian counselors. I don't care how many people I see. And if I say to them and I sneak to them and they have an issue, what's going on? I marched for Yusuf Hawkins in Howard Beach. I walk for Eric Garner, and this is still going on. And then I said to them, you want to pray? Let us pray. Let us find some specific things to wind down your anxiety or upgrade your depression. So I say weave it together, call it out, and work it out. And then follow it up on your next session. I even try to follow up in between what's going on. And let me just put this in here, Dr. Paul. I am absolutely proud, and I have underestimated the clergy as of my, not only the Black Seventh-day Adventist clergy, but all of our clergy who has utilized their mental health and in their insurance and have really reached out and trusted the process. And you'll be surprised the amount of ministers who are dead serious, no pun intended, about their mental health so they can give the same service to their congregation. Because as a mental health therapist, I know I get a lot of questions, but I know you get double the questions. So it's okay to incorporate prayer in your counsel, but that prayer has to be activated with a to-do list and action steps and some coping, unless and you know, it's just dead.
All right.
I would add to that, prayer is a tool and therapy is a strategy. And so, you know, I have a different experience from Garry. Most of my clients are not Adventist or Christian. I work with a lot of atheists and non-Christian individuals. But, you know, we all have different faith or spiritual beliefs that inspire and motivate and drive us. And I would encourage for people who think that all they need is Jesus is to remember that not even Jesus was able to make it through with just himself. When in the Garden of Gethsemane, Christ asked for his friends to accompany him. He called out to God in the moments of his deepest despair. And so even Jesus realized that he needed support. He needed strength from an external source. And I think we see a number of characters in the Bible when we look at David and Elijah and Jonah, who in their deepest moments of despair, in what I consider to be their own mental health stressful moments, that they needed something more. And so Jesus does not call for us to, you know, ignore the need for an extensive support system, which can include a therapist, to be able to make it through some of those moments in our lives.
Awesome.
Well, wow. We have had a wonderful time here. We're so excited to have you, Tiffany, and Dr. Llewellyn and Garry Graham here with us. You have truly shared some good strategies and some good points in which we can, our listeners, based on what I've been seeing on the chat, they are really engaged. There are a number of questions there. We're gonna probably try to get those questions to y'all. Maybe y'all can help us to answer some of them. I don't know what to say. You have truly helped us to deal with not only mental health, kind of talk about what's different between mental health and mental illness, and also kind of cope with a little bit of what we're dealing with in society right now. So today has been a knock out of the park. We just want to say thank you to both of you for coming and being a part of the Pastors Roundtable today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor.
We want to also let our viewers know that we will be putting in the chat ways in which you can connect with these two therapists. And they will be able to, if you have other questions or you want to engage them in your services or you want to connect with them, and I know Tiffany does the Adventist for Social Justice group. You want to join in with her, we'll put that in the chat so you'll have that information to connect with them. But again, we're just so blessed to have them. What do you think, guys? Was this one of those better shows?
Listen. Powerful, I mean, and timely. We talk about ministry being real. This is real. And to have professionals come on here to talk about the benefits of counseling. And I just want to say this. Listen, counseling is a good thing. I mean, and I think it's necessary for us to be able to survive through these times. And again, for them coming on, especially at a time like this, dealing with what we're dealing with, it's just such a blessing. So again, thank you all for coming. And we look forward to hearing more from what's happening in the counseling world so that we can not only share it with our members, but also take advantage of it ourselves.
Amen. You know, Scripture, and Paul is talking about the gifts that God is going to put in the church. One of the gifts was the word of counsel and the word of wisdom. And so it's not a strange thing. It's not an odd thing. It's not a secular thing. It's not a worldly thing. It was a prophetic thing that this gift was going to show up in God's church. And it's just a wonderful thing that it is available to us at this particular time in Earth's history. And so we want to encourage our listeners, take care of your mental health. Don't wait until it's jacked up. I'm sorry, until it's messed up.
No, you're right. Exactly.
Go ahead and talk to somebody. Talk to a professional. Talk to somebody who loves the Lord. And you will find that you'll be able to get some release. So again, thank you so very much. We want to kind of pivot and just make sure that everybody knows that the Pastors Roundtable now has its own Facebook page. We have been broadcasting on various platforms before, but now every week you can catch the Pastors Roundtable on the Pastors Roundtable Facebook page. There's also a Pastors Roundtable YouTube channel that we are streaming to both of those each week. So if you go to the Pastors Roundtable page, you can find the Pastors Roundtable YouTube channel there. You click that and go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel. The actual stream quality is a little bit better on YouTube. You can still engage in the chat if you're watching on YouTube. And then if you click the little bell once you subscribe to the channel, then every time we go live or we put anything on the YouTube channel, you're going to get a notice so that you can keep up with what's going on. Next week, gentlemen, we've got something on the table next week.
Pastor, before you talk about next week, I just want you to know we have added our Instagram feed. So we are sharing on Instagram.
Y'all blowing
Facebook.
Up like that.
Don't let this gray fool y'all. We know something about Instagram.
So you can engage the Pastors Roundtable on Instagram. Come out, find us. Follow us. We'll be posting there.
We need to interview you guys. I'm so proud of you guys, and I hate to extend this, and social media is so important, and I've been following you guys over the last couple of weeks. You don't overdo it. I'm just very proud of what's happening, and I'm just hoping that it becomes a great forum for all people. Because all people.
Yeah. Well, that's a great segue, and thank you for those words, Garry, because next week the round table is going international. Next Sabbath afternoon. We know that COVID-19 has impacted this church in lots of financial ways, and we've had some earlier conversations that we tiptoed around the idea of how it's going to impact our facilities and the monies that we pay on our rent, on our mortgage, on our grounds, on just upkeep of those churches. And so we're going to be looking at and some of us are wondering, when we've seen our church attendances almost double, triple, quadruple online versus in the building, there are some of us out there who are saying, wait, why are we spending all this money on this building when we're able to reach so many other people here? But so next week we're going to be talking about local church facilities, form versus function versus value. Local church facilities, form, what they look like, how they're built, versus function, what we do with them. Some of us are spending a whole lot of money and we're only in the church one day a week. And how we are reaching people and doing ministry that way, and what is the value that we're getting out of them. And so to help us with that discussion, we're going to Canada, and we're going to have Dr. David Jameson, who's going to be with us. He is from the Church in the Valley. This place, this church building, it is a phenomenal building. I have seen churches outside of Adventism that are creative, that are innovative, that are out of the box. This is the first time I have seen this in Adventism. Now, it might be somewhere else as well in Adventism, but you're going to be You're going to be blown away by what you see has been happening in this church in Canada. Dr. David Jameson. Roger, tell us about our other guest next week.
The second guest we have with us on next week is Dr. Lyle Notice, who is the youth director for the Alberta Conference. But he came up with this concept of pop-up church. Every week they're going to be in a different place. Wow. It was just phenomenal the way I heard it. But he's going to join us. He's going to share about how that came about and what are some of the challenges he's having with COVID-19 having pop-up church.
All right.
Let me say this, Pastor Paul. Listen, I know you all are going to Google these pastors. You're going to look at pictures. But there's nothing like having an interaction with them on this show. So do your homework.
They're going to be here. They're going to be here.
Next week, by God's grace.
Can I throw out the next week too? Right.
Sure.
Oh, wait a minute. You want to go?
Don't want to go to next week? That's going to be the 13th. Let me go to 13th. Let me go to 13th. Okay. So on the 13th, we've also been worried and interested about how this new world is going to impact Seventh-day Adventist Christian education.
Yes, sir.
And we, at my church, we have a K through 12. We just finished with 103 young people the end of this school year, and our teachers and principal, we're scrambling trying to figure out what is Christian education going to look like. And so on the 13th, we have with us Deborah Freisen, Miss Deborah Freisen. She is the education superintendent for the Southern Union. Southern Union has the largest school system in the North American division, K-12 system, and so she's going to be able to come to us and share with us some of the ideas, some of the plans, some of the challenges even that Christian education is going to have. And then we're also going to be looking at the tertiary level, and Dr. Leslie Pollard is going to be with us on the 13th as well. A number of you have young people that are planning on going to college and they just don't, or trying to go back to college and not quite sure what that's going to look like. So Dr. Leslie Pollard, the president of Oakwood University, is going to be with us on the 13th, along with Sister Freisen, Deborah Freisen. So we're looking forward to that on the 13th as well. Listen, don't miss next week. Next week is going to be fun. You're going to your imagination and ingenuity and is going to be tickled. You're going to see some stuff, and you're going to begin to dream up some stuff when you see what God has done and what God is doing in a lot of the other places, and that's what we're looking forward to. Thank you again so very much, all of you, for joining us. Again, thank you to our guest, Garry Graham, Tiffany Llewellyn. Look for some information we're going to post about them, so you can find out more about our guests on the Pastors Roundtable page, on the Facebook page there. Thank you again so very much. I'm supposed to be hitting my outro music button here. We're still trying to get all this technology stuff going. I don't hear nothing yet. I don't know if y'all hear anything, but you might not. Anyway, God bless you. Thank you so much. We will see you next Sabbath afternoon, 4 o'clock.
Amen.